It was supposed to be a quiet night in Paris, but what unfolded beneath the stone canopy of the Pont de l'Alma tunnel changed history. For decades, the world only knew fragments, tabloid headlines, paparazzi photos, blurry memories told by strangers. But not from the people who were truly there. Not from the first responders who stepped into the wreckage and found one of the most iconic women in the world clinging to her last breath. That silence has finally been broken. His name is Xavier Gourmelon, a French firefighter, a name history nearly forgot. Until now, he heard her voice. He held her hand, and for nearly 25 years he carried the memory in silence. Now, retired and far from the chaos of that infamous night, he's speaking out, and what he reveals is more haunting, more intimate, and more human than anything we've heard before. Let's go back. August 30th, 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, had spent the day in Paris with Dodi Al Fayed. The two had become inseparable, a couple hounded by media, constantly stalked by cameras, yet determined to carve out moments of peace. That night, they planned to dine at the Ritz Hotel, but with photographers swarming the entrance there. Plans shifted, a backdoor exit, a decoy, a late-night escape to Dodi's private apartment. Nothing about this plan was ordinary, but it was routine for Diana, always evading. Always hiding. No one could have predicted that their final car ride would become one of the most analyzed events in modern history. Their vehicle. A black Mercedes-Benz W1480, armored, fast, supposedly safe. At the wheel was Henry Paul, the Ritz's head of security. But he wasn't just a driver that night. He was the man holding fate in his hands, and he was compromised. Toxicology reports would later reveal he'd consumed significant amounts of alcohol and antidepressants. Why he was allowed to drive remains one of the night's central mysteries. As the Mercedes sped away from the Ritz, to decoy vehicles left in opposite directions, trying to lure the paparazzi off the scent. But it didn't work. Photographers followed. Motorbikes roared behind the car. The chase was on. Inside the Mercedes, Diana, Dodi, their bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, and Henry Paul, pushing the car to speeds near 120 kilometers per hour. That's over 75 miles per hour, twice the speed limit. Then, at 12:23 a.m., they entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. What happened next took less than 5 seconds. Henry Paul lost control. The car slammed into the 13th pillar at high speed. No airbags deployed for the rear passengers. Diana wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The crash was catastrophic. What followed was confusion, panic, and disbelief. But amidst that chaos, one man received a call that would change his life. Firefighter Xavier Gourmelon was on duty that night at the nearby fire station. The call came in: serious accident, multiple victims, possible fatalities. No names, no titles, just a crash in a tunnel. He and his team responded immediately. They arrived within minutes. What they saw was carnage. The Mercedes was crumpled beyond recognition. Smoke drifted from the hood. Debris littered the tunnel floor. And then voices, groans. They were still alive. Gourmelon moved quickly. Dodi was already gone, declared dead on impact. Henry Paul, the driver, was also deceased. Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard, was injured but conscious barely. His face was crushed, but he kept calling out, "The princess. Help the princess." It wasn't until Xavier reached the backseat that he saw her. A blonde woman, unconscious but breathing. He didn't know who she was. Not yet. All he knew was that time was running out. He checked her pulse weak. Her breathing shallow. She stirred slightly. And then, in a whisper, she spoke, "My God, what's happened?" Those would be the last words Diana ever spoke. Xavier later said he thought they were going to save her. He truly believed she would live. He gave her oxygen, held her hand. Tried to calm her. Her injuries weren't visible at first, a slight abrasion, some bleeding. But inside, where no one could see, her body was already losing the battle. The paramedics took over. She was loaded into the ambulance and rushed toward Petit Salpêtrière Hospital. And Xavier stayed behind, watching. Still unaware that he had just comforted Princess Diana. He returned to the station. And that's when the TV announced the crash. That's when everything changed. Diana, Princess of Wales, was fighting for her life. And then just after 4 a.m. she was gone. The world woke up to disbelief, and Xavier Gourmillon stayed silent. For over 2 decades, he never told the media. He never gave interviews. He never sought attention. Bound by duty and by law, he kept the details locked away. But time has a way of loosening the chains of silence. And when he finally did speak, the details he gave were raw, honest, and devastating. He said she looked at peace, that she wasn't in pain in those final seconds, that when she whispered those words, "Oh my God, what's happened?" it wasn't fear. It was confusion, sadness. He also revealed that Diana's heart stopped at the scene, that he performed CPR, that she regained a pulse, that for a moment, just a moment, he thought she would live. But fate had already decided. The injuries inside her body were massive. Her heart had been torn by the impact. There was nothing anyone could have done. Still, he tried. And he remembers, even now, years later, Xavier says he can see her face, hear her voice, feel her hand in his. And that's the part of the story the cameras never captured. Not the headlines, not the conspiracy theories. The human part, a firefighter, a princess, a tunnel. A whisper in the dark, and then silence, but silence never lasts forever. Not in stories like this, because the questions never stopped. Why was Henry Paul allowed to drive under the influence? Why weren't Diana and Dodi wearing seat belts? Why did it take the ambulance nearly 40 minutes to reach the hospital when it was only 4 miles away? Why were the paparazzi allowed to chase them through the streets? And why did it take over a decade for the official inquest to conclude what so many suspected? That this was not just an accident, it was a preventable tragedy. Maybe even something more. The world didn't just wake up to the news, it woke up in shock. August 31, 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, dead at 36. The woman once married to the future king, the mother of 2 young princes. The humanitarian who walked through minefields and hugged AIDS patients when no one else would, was gone. Just like that. Millions didn't believe it. Not because they were in denial, because it didn't make sense. How could someone like her die in a car crash? How could a woman constantly surrounded by security, protocol, media, and cameras die in a tunnel with no clear footage, no direct witness account, and no real explanation? The questions piled up fast. First came the outrage. Protesters gathered in London. Mourners left mountains of flowers outside Kensington Palace. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then millions across the world stood frozen, crying, watching. What made it worse wasn't just the loss. It was the silence. The royal family, stunned, retreated into Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Days passed with no public statement. People wanted answers. People wanted someone to blame, and soon a theory began to take shape, one darker than anyone was ready for. What if it wasn't just an accident? The tabloids ran wild. Headlines screamed of plots, secrets, betrayals. Was it MI6? Was the crash orchestrated? Had someone ordered Diana's death? It sounds sensational, but even now, decades later, the questions haven't fully gone away. And here's why. From the very beginning, inconsistencies haunted the official story. Why did Henry Paul, the Ritz driver, have multiple bank accounts with unexplained large deposits? Asterisk why were surveillance cameras along the route mysteriously not recording? Asterisk why did the ambulance carrying Diana stop for 10 minutes before reaching the hospital? Asterisk and why did the royal family seem so distant, so delayed in mourning? Asterisk theories poured in like floodwater. Asterisk some claimed Diana was pregnant and that this was unacceptable to the monarchy. Asterisk others pointed to a 1995 letter Diana wrote, where she claimed someone was planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury. Asterisk was she being paranoid? Or was she warning us? Asterisk we may never know. But what's certain is this. People didn't trust the narrative. And to this day, many still don't. Asterisk the official inquest into Diana's death began in 2004, 7 years. After the crash, it took another 3 years to conclude. Asterisk by 2008, the verdict was announced. Unlawful killing due to grossly negligent driving by Henry Paul and the pursuing paparazzi. Asterisk no conspiracy, no foul play. Just recklessness, speed, and chaos. Asterisk but for those who knew Diana, for those who stood beside her broken body in that tunnel, that explanation never quite sat right. Especially not for Xavier Gourmillon, because his memories are not theories. They're moments, real ones, asterisk, and they're far more chilling. When Xavier finally came forward with his story, he revealed details the public never knew. Asterisk he said Diana regained consciousness in the car, that she spoke calmly, that her injuries weren't visible at first. Asterisk but beneath the surface she was already dying. Her heart had been torn in the crash, literally ripped open inside her chest. Asterisk a rare, nearly impossible injury. One that medical teams struggled to fix even after hours of surgery. The heart, the one she was most known for, asterisk it's symbolic. In a way that feels cruel, asterisk Xavier didn't see a princess that night. He saw a woman in pain, alone, afraid, fighting to live. He gave her oxygen, whispered words of comfort, held her hand, asterisk and then he let go. The burden didn't end when his shift did, asterisk after the crash, Xavier returned to the firehouse. His team cleaned their gear, the sun came up. But something had shifted inside him. He sat down, turned on the television, asterisk and saw the face of the woman he tried to save. The woman who whispered, "My God, what's happened?" with her final breath. He had no idea who she was that night. Asterisk now, the whole world did. From that moment forward, he was bound by silence. Asterisk he wasn't allowed to speak to journalists. He couldn't correct false reports. He couldn't answer questions, not even when the conspiracy theories exploded. For 20 years, he kept it all inside, asterisk, but the weight became too much, asterisk, and in retirement, far from the media's gaze, he finally told the world what really happened. He didn't just confirm that Diana spoke, he didn't just describe her last breath. He talked about the fear, the eerie calm, the strange delays. The moments that didn't add up. Asterisk like the time between the crash and the ambulance's arrival. Like the 10-minute stop the ambulance made before reaching the hospital allegedly to stabilize her, asterisk, but Xavier was there at the scene. He said she was stable when they put her in the ambulance, injured but not yet critical, so why stop? Why wait? Asterisk, why didn't they rush her straight in? Even seasoned medics can't explain it, and Xavier, he's still asking himself those same questions, asterisk meanwhile, as the press dissected every moment of Diana's final night, her family was dealing with the aftermath. Prince Charles flew to Paris to retrieve her body, asterisk William and Harry, just 15 and 12 years old, stayed at Balmoral. When they finally saw the crowds, the tears, the unimaginable outpouring of love, they realized their mother wasn't just a royal, she was a symbol. A beacon of compassion, and her death had left the world colder. Asterisk the funeral, broadcast globally, drew 2.5 billion viewers. Elton John sang a rewritten version of Candle in the Wind. Crowds wept openly. Foreign leaders flew in from every continent. Diana was mourned like no royal had been before. But Xavier watched it all from a distance, quiet, haunted, not because of what he saw but because of what he felt. He didn't just lose a patient that night. He lost peace. He'd done everything right. Everything he was trained to do, and it still wasn't enough. For years, he returned to the memory. At night, in the silence, the image of her broken body, her faint whisper. The sound of the chainsaw cutting through the wreck. The smell of gasoline and blood. The surreal moment when he looked into her eyes and didn't see fear but confusion. A woman who didn't understand what had happened. Who thought maybe it was just another chase, another accident. She didn't. No, she was dying, and maybe that's a mercy. When Xavier finally gave interviews, his voice cracked as he recalled it. I gave her oxygen. I spoke to her. She seemed calm, he said. Then her heart stopped. I did CPR and it started again. He thought they'd won. But they hadn't. He watched as she was driven away. And that was the last time he ever saw her. Years later. Standing in a quiet airport in Brittany where he now leads emergency services, he still feels it. The wait, the moment, the silence that followed. The Pont de l'Alma tunnel has become a tourist attraction. People leave flowers, notes, photos, as if they might reconnect with the woman lost there. But Xavier has never gone back. He doesn't need to. Because for him, the tunnel never left. It's always there. In his memory. In the whisper of my God. What's happened? And in the thousands of people who still ask the same question today. What really happened to Princess Diana, and why, after all these years, does it still feel like we don't know? Years have passed since that night in Paris, and yet time hasn't erased the questions. Nor the grief, nor the strange silence that settled over the world after Diana's death, an almost sacred stillness that no headline, no report, no royal statement could ever quite fill. There's something about Diana's story that refuses to fade. Even now, the world revisits her final hours not to sensationalize, but to understand, because she was more than a royal. She was a mystery, a paradox of grace and rebellion, of elegance and vulnerability, of royalty and raw humanity. And when she died, something shifted, globally, permanently. It wasn't just the death of a princess, it was the death of an illusion, the realization that even someone loved by millions, with bodyguards and cameras and palaces, could be so devastatingly mortal. And that realization still haunts us. But there's one man who doesn't have to revisit those questions, because he lives with the answers. Xavier Melon. For 20 years, he didn't speak. He didn't theorize. He didn't guess. He didn't write books or sell stories. He carried the truth, and the truth is simple and terrible. Diana didn't die on impact. She fought. She held on. She whispered, "My God, what's happened?" And then she slipped away. But what haunts Xavier most isn't just her voice. It's how ordinary it all felt. He once said, "For me, it was a traffic accident. A serious one, yes, but just that. We didn't know who she was. We treated her like anyone else." There's a kind of tragic poetry in that. That the most famous woman in the world died not as a princess, but as a patient, unrecognized, unshielded. And ultimately, UNRECOVERABLE. But maybe that's the part of the story we needed to hear most. Not the tabloids, not the conspiracies, but the quiet humanity. Because in those final moments, stripped of title and status, Diana was just a woman, alone in a crushed car, afraid, whispering to the stranger holding her hand. And what she said wasn't grand or profound. It was simple, human. My God, what's happened? Those words echo through time not just because they were her. Last, but because they're what the world has been asking ever since, what happened to Diana? Was it fate? Was it recklessness? Was it something more? Even today, people cling to alternative explanations. The Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al-Fayed, Dodi's father, spent years insisting the crash was a murder. A cover-up, that Diana was pregnant, that the monarchy couldn't allow it. He brought legal actions, hired private investigators, fought in courtrooms and press conferences. But the 2008 inquest stood by its conclusion: unlawful killing due to reckless driving and media pursuit. Still, the doubts remain, because the pieces don't quite fit. Because the silence speaks louder than the words, because Diana herself predicted something like this could happen. And because those closest to her, like her sons, have never fully addressed the darker suspicions. Prince William and Prince Harry were just boys when their mother died. They walked behind her coffin, watched by billions, stoic, silent, shielded by tradition. But in adulthood, their truths began to surface. Harry especially has spoken openly about the trauma, the anger, the confusion. He said once, they told Emmy to cry and I couldn't, I felt numb. In interviews and documentaries, both brothers revealed that they still struggle to understand that night. Not just the facts, but the why. The aftermath of Diana's death wasn't just grief. It was institutional reckoning. The royal family, long seen as aloof, faced massive public backlash for their cold response. Queen Elizabeth eventually returned to London and gave a live televised address, something she had never done before. In such a personal way, we have all been trying in our different ways to cope, she said. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings: disbelief, incomprehension, anger. It was the closest the monarchy came to acknowledging their misstep. And yet, the damage had been done. Diana had changed the monarchy in life. And in death, she forced it to evolve or face extinction. Today, her legacy is everywhere. In how William and Harry approach their roles, in how Kate Middleton engages with the public, even in how Meghan Markle's entrance and exit from royal life mirrored the scrutiny Diana once endured. But through all of it, there's one constant: Diana's absence. It's a void that can't be filled. And for Xavier Gourmillon, that void isn't philosophical, it's personal. After retiring from active firefighting, he took a quieter post-emergency chief at an airport in Brittany, but he never forgot that night. Every time a call comes in, every time a siren blares, every time he steps into a chaotic scene, there's a moment, brief but powerful, where he's back in that tunnel, back in the smoke, back at her side, and that's what sets his story apart. Because for most of us, Diana is a memory. But for Xavier, she was real, a heartbeat, a whisper, a pulse that faded in his hands, and maybe that's why his story matters so much. Because it reminds us that beneath the crown, beneath the glamour, beneath the myths, she was human. She bled, she hoped, she whispered, "My God, what's happened?" And someone heard her. Someone held her hand, and someone remembers. In the end, the story of Diana's death isn't just a mystery. It's a mirror, reflecting how we treat fame, how we chase beauty, how we ignore cries for help until it's too late. Diana tried to tell us. In her interviews, in her letters, in her final whisper. And maybe now, decades later, we're finally listening.